Many of us avoid the Old Testament of the Bible because it can be quite puzzling. And yet, Jesus references the Old Testament, the Bible he read, frequently in his teaching and preaching. This 3-week series at Sycamore Creek will reintroduce us to the Old Testament, the Bible Jesus read, and explore how it connects to our lives today.
I would say most of the time, I'm a glass half full type of person. Maybe even glass 88% full, let's say. I go about my days looking for the best in people, in situations, and in every other aspect of life. Now I'll give you an example of my best and also an example probably nearer to my worst. But first, let me introduce myself. Hey, my name is Erik and I am a partner at Sycamore Creek. And I help out in various areas including greeting, co-hosting, Teen Fuel, which is kind of like our youth group, and I'm on the vision team, which is our equivalent to a board at Sycamore Creek. Now on that team, I would technically be the chair, but that sounds way too formal for me. So at least for the people on the group, I ask to be called the armoire instead. Now I'm a pharmacist in the Lansing area, and because of my job, that's actually how I came to know Sycamore Creek. It was while working across the street at a pharmacy called Central Pharmacy that I saw just a ton of cars outside the gas station. And there were a group of people out there on this frigid February day that had $5 free gas signs just strewn about. Now, one of my coworkers was there and I asked her to go out and just go get some gas. Tell me what's going on and run back in. So she came back in and she said, now it's the church next door giving out this gas. And I was so confused by that, and I was looking for a church at the time. And I thought any church willing to do something that creative, well, I mean, it's worth a shot to check it out. And here I am because of that. Now back to these examples I was talking about. I had just graduated from college with my pharmacy degree, and really there are like two routes you can take. You can either go into the field, or you can do a residency where you can specialize and learn more. And I had really felt a pull to do the residency, mainly because of the great opportunities that it can create. And so I applied to a few places, and I even had a chance to do some in-person interviews. One of those places where I got an interview was this really awesome city, and it was just outside of Louisville, Kentucky. It was helping out diabetic patients manage their insulin and stuff like that. I just felt like that was it for me. Now I felt so confident after that interview that I was planning out where to live and all the fun things I would do in Louisville, I don't know, when I got at that residency. The zoo, the waterfront, the derby, it was all gonna be great. But come match day, when everyone gets matched up with their locations, I felt the biggest pit in my stomach when I didn't. Now, needless to say, it hurt. It hurt a lot, with a pain of complete rejection. And in that moment, after I allowed the pain of that to sting, I felt a calmness then, and that shifted to me thinking, what good can come from this? And what I recognized is that I had an opportunity to go back to my hometown and work for some years serving the community that helped to shape me as a person. And as well, I was able to see my family much more than I ever would have been possible had I lived hundreds of miles away. Now, of course, there are many factors at play there, but I would be pretty confident to say that if I had received that residency and gone that route, I never would have made it to Lansing and to Sycamore Creek, and both of which have had such an impact in my life and made it so full. Now that was a good day. Let me talk about my not so good days to balance that out, because trust me, I am not always like this. Let's call this the 22% empty. Now at work one day, we had made a mistake in filling a medication for a person that could have caused a great deal of harm to them. And while we're all human and in different areas, mistakes happen, even at a pharmacy, that's not to say that this is any small issue. It was a big deal. Depending on the severity, it could be litigation, license revoked, never being able to work in the field again. To say I was nervous would be a huge understatement. My plan, though, was to own it, apologize, and make the situation right in whatever way possible. But even before talking with the person, I had made assumptions that he was going to be mad, terrible to talk to, rude. He was just going to be horrible. And even if he was those things, it would have been completely warranted, as we had made the mistake. But what I was doing was I was painting a negative image of this person in my mind before even uttering a word to him. In this moment, though, I was taught such a valuable lesson. Midway through the conversation and myself spewing out words the whole time while he doesn't say much, saying everything under the moon, he says this phrase to me that I'll never forget. He says, "If God can forgive me, I can forgive you." Now, the man that I had deemed awful from the start showed more love and grace than I show on my best days. Now, at Sycamore Creek, we like to stop just a few times during the message to give a chance to share your own thoughts, meet your neighbors, and just have a break from me. And I wonder, how full of a glass type person are you? What are your percentages? Chat about it. Now, even though my normal demeanor, it leans towards positive, as you heard, it doesn't mean that I don't get overwhelmed with this world. War, injustice, racism, economic disparity, it all feels like weight, and it just keeps getting added on and makes everyday life that much heavier, that much harder. For myself, what weighs heavy on my heart the most is economic disparity. Now, I've been fortunate in my past to be able to help out in both local and overseas missions. And what I've been able to see is, I've been able to see poverty with my own eyes. And also help out, though, and get to know the people who don't have the resources that they need. And I struggle with this mentality that I hear sometimes, that being unhoused means that you're a threat, and that there are so many systems in place already that continue to hold people down, that weigh people down. And with that weight and the seemingly impossible challenge that these problems present, now it can feel like evil is winning, like the present situation lacks hope. Now I wonder if you've ever felt like this too. When you look around, you don't see a world full of goodness, but rather see a world that is in pain and struggling for a better way. You are not alone. There's a group of people who share the same doubts, pains, and complexities that we all feel. And these are the prophets of the Old Testament. And now you may be thinking, that's quite a stretch to think that these old guys who wrote stuff way too long ago could ever relate to how I feel. But don't tune me out just yet, because trust me, I am right there with you. We're in a series right now talking about a book by Philip Yancey called The Bible Jesus Read. Now, this book talks about, the Bible that Jesus read. Shocking, I know. Now, it's a part of an 18-month deep dive that we have been doing into the Sermon on the Mount. And a pivotal quote that Jesus has in the sermon is, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." Now, what Jesus is saying, when he's saying the law or the prophets, it's like a hyperlink that would be immediately connected by a listener at that time to mean the entirety of the Old Testament, as we would call it. The law, or teachings, being part of the Pentateuch, which just means the first 5 books of the Bible, and the prophets, which is what we're going to discuss today, and why they were an important part of what Jesus talked about and knew so well. Now, I bet we all have a different level of understanding or a different image that comes up when I say the word prophets. So here's some quick background so we can at least all be a little bit on the same page. The prophets make up 17 books of the Bible, and they range from some of the longer books to some of the shortest books of the Bible. The 5 longer books are deemed the major prophets, and the shorter 12 books are the minor prophets. So it's not anything they said, really, or if one was cooler or anything like that. It was just how big the books were. Now, another good term that Yancey uses instead of prophet for this group is seer, because this group of people can see what no one else can. And it's important to note that these aren't just books of the Bible. These were people. Now, if I'm being honest, while I've read through some of them, it is certainly not the spot in the Bible where I would normally go to, or even particularly want to go to. If I'm feeling a pick-me-up, I'm not really going to the prophets. I'll go to the Gospels. I'll go to the Psalms. I'll go to somewhere else. And Yancey, he brings up a good story in his book where he poses a question of why people don't read the prophets. Or he asks a question, why don't we read the prophets in his Bible study class? And one graduate student summed it up perfectly, saying, the prophets are weird and confusing, and they all sound alike. Now, I resonate so much with that phrase because without putting it so succinctly, those were the same reservations I was having about these books of the Bible. Weird and confusing. In the book of Daniel, there are super strange depictions of creatures with varying numbers of toes, horns, and eyes. There are probably too many theories out there where people try to count these toes, horns, and eyes as a reference to when the apocalypse will happen. Now, this happened in the 1840s when believers gathered on mountaintops to wait for Christ's return. In the 1970s, a book came out called The Late Great Planet Earth, which tried to predict the end times, and did so wrong, may I add. And another group took some numbers that they found in the prophets, and they did some fancy math to determine that Jesus would return and the world would end in the year 2000. Now, as you can probably understand from that, these formulas still need some work. But it does point to how confusing these books can be. Now, the prophets also did a lot of weird, confusing things. Isaiah walked around butt naked and barefoot for 3 years to make a political statement. Jeremiah staggered under an ox yoke to draw attention to his message of doom. Ezekiel, he laid on his side for months at a time, bound by ropes, facing a clay model of Jerusalem. They are a type of very intense performance artist, getting their point across through demonstration. Now, I know for a fact that I wouldn't do anything remotely similar to that to get my point across. I'm not even sure if I would want to be friends with someone who did that type of stuff. If they had Facebook at that time, I imagine it would have been one of those, let's put them on pause maybe for 30 days or something like that. Let them recoup a little bit. But here, I'll stop us just for another chat question. What comes to mind for you when you think of the word prophets? Now, there are even more things that the prophets said and did that would make a modern reader of the Bible a bit unsure. But here are a couple of important things about the situation we are in that we can learn from the prophets. It's going to get bad, and then it will get much better. These are the same themes that I brought up in the beginning: war, injustice, racism, economic disparity. All of them are the very things that the prophets dealt with and brought to light in their time. These aren't new inventions of our time or our government. It would have been easy for the prophets to just go along in a wave of patriotism, although they wouldn't have called it that at the time. But instead, they challenged the status quo. Daniel continued to worship God in the face of a decree from King Darius prohibiting that very thing, which is what got him thrown in the lion's den. Jeremiah, he had death plots planned against him because he spoke the words of God. Micah challenged social injustice and rebuked those who were misusing their power. The prophets weren't afraid to voice their doubts, their fears, and their pains to the people of Israel, and most importantly, to God. This is a really hard concept for me because at times I'm afraid to voice those doubts. Have you ever felt that same fear as well? That if I doubt God, I must not have a strong faith, or if I question whether or not God has a plan, that I'm not being the right kind of Christian? The prophets show us another way, a way that we can talk honestly and boldly to God. Listen to some of the things they said. Truly, you are a God who hides himself. How long, O Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Oh, the agony of my heart pounds within me, I cannot keep silent. The prophets weren't afraid to talk to God, sharing their anger and frustrations. And when they did, something truly amazing happened. God talked back. The prophets help us get to know God. Yancey puts it best when he says, one who reads the prophets encounters not an impassible, distant deity, but an actual person, a God as passionate as any person you have met. God feels delight and frustration and anger. He weeps and moans with pain. Again and again, God is shocked by the behavior of human beings, by us. Behavior that God says, I did not command or mention, nor did it enter my mind. God, in a strange turn of events, points back to the prophets, the people who were questioning God's apparent absence. And this is what God says. You are my proof. You are the proof of my concern. I'm speaking through you to show my care, my pain, my anguish. I know all the things that are plaguing you, the pain, the trials, the conflict, and I'm with you, and I love you. I'll be with you now and in the future. Take hope. Take courage. Two things become clear about God in regards to us as we read the prophets. The first is God passionately desires God's very own people. And the second, just as important, is we matter to God. Abraham Heschel, who was a Jewish scholar in the 20th century, he sums up this description of God by saying, it is a thought staggering and hardly compatible with any rational approach to the understanding of God, that the creator of heaven and earth should care at all about how an obscure individual man or woman behaves toward poor widows and orphans. Yet God does. I truly believe that when we hurt, God also hurts. Where we see pain, suffering, and injustice in the world, God also sees that very injustice even more fully and is broken because of it. When we cause pain intentionally or unintentionally, God is distraught over the way we devalue one another. God cares and doesn't give up on us because of how much God loves us and how much love he has for us. The prophets help us get to know God. You know, we've been talking about the prophets, but as I mentioned before, Yancey says a much more fitting term may be seer, because instead of being a teller of fortunes, the prophets are able to see what no one else can with an X-ray vision into the present and into the future. Prophets simply see better than anyone else. The insights, the things these prophets saw, they might be fulfilled in three different ways or times. The first one is the now. Now, these were prophecies that relate to the prophet's own day. In the now, the prophets were always concerned with how the people are doing with injustice and or idolatry. The one example is that Isaiah sees that Assyria will invade Moab because of how they've been acting. Now, the second one is the later. Now, this was predictions of future events well removed from the prophet's own time, but later would be fulfilled in history. Micah, he sees that the ruler of Israel will be born in Bethlehem. And that ruler, of course, is Jesus, who was born in Bethlehem. And now the third is the much later. Now, these prophecies or insights, these are ones that still seem to lie in the distant future. And honestly, these ones are pretty confusing. Daniel sees the huge mountain filling the whole earth. And to be honest, the much later prophecies, we don't exactly know what they mean yet. Martin Luther King Jr., though, he said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And that is a perfect lens with which to look at these later prophecies. Not knowing exactly what will come, but knowing that the arc is bending towards justice. Now, even though a lot of thought from people and time has been focused into the later and much later prophecies, the now insights were much more important to the prophets than anything else. The now prophecies give weight to the future because it sets a tone of being able to trust God in the now and to hold that trust into the future. The prophets told of a recreated heaven and earth in order to demonstrate that history would be redeemed by by the future. And that future is God's future, and not by the present reality of suffering, chaos, and political upheaval. To see the present not as it is, but what as it could be. There are multiple views of history with the prophets shedding light to a more linear versus cyclical view of history. Now, I won't get into all this too much, but let's say with a cyclical view of history, there can be an ideology to not worry about this world because everything will happen again, the same in the future, without a difference in what we do. We are just passing through on our way to a final resting place. However, that type of thinking can be so harmful because it can lead us to not bother with or even care about the systems that produce pain and suffering in this world because of a spiritual indifference. The prophets seem to turn that around and say that there is an end at some indeterminate amount of time. And because that there is an end, we need to certainly focus on the present because there are injustices happening now that need to change in order to see a much more beautiful future. And this makes me realize that prophets aren't just from many years ago. They're still among us today. Now, I say this with a caveat because I'm sure there are bounds of others out there that can come to mind for people, but two who stand out for me are Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Shane Claiborne. Now, the former saw racism and injustice as a poison, infecting the hearts of many, and he could see a much more beautiful future than the current present, or the present of his time even. He called this the beloved community. Now, the latter, Claiborne, who founded The Simple Way and wrote a book called The Irresistible Revolution, he continues to advocate for the poor and marginalized through the philosophy to live like Jesus meant his teachings. The life of the prophet is not one without struggle, but they all believed their work was worth it. What does that look like for you? For me, I recently had a job change, and there were a number of reasons that I ended up making that change. But one big reason is the fact that I would be working at a community mental health building in Lansing, which would be able to make a difference with a group of people that can sometimes be overlooked. But I'd like you to take a minute and talk about with your neighbor, what does being a prophet look like in your own context? Chat about it. Now, we unfortunately can't do it all. We can't solve every problem we might see in the world as much as we might like to. It can all be incredibly overwhelming. And what that'll do is it'll tempt us to not engage at all. It reminds me of this story called The Tale of the Starfish. And it goes like this. A young girl was walking along the beach, upon which thousands of starfish had been washed up in a terrible storm. When she came to each starfish, she would pick it up and she would throw it back into the ocean. People watched her with amusement. She had been doing this for some time when a man approached her and said, little girl, why are you doing this? Look at the beach. You can't save all these starfish. You can't begin to make a difference." The girl seemed crushed, suddenly deflated. But after a few moments, she bent down, she picked up another starfish, and she hurled it as far as she could into the ocean. Then she looked up at the man and replied, "Well, I made a difference for that one." Where can you see yourself making a difference for one starfish? Where can you see yourself looking to why all the starfish in general are even on the beach to begin with? There is a need for both direct aid and also systemic change in this world. I almost think of the pedals of a bicycle. And while we have infinite concern, we also have finite time. As we spend more time pressing down on one pedal, there may not be enough time, or there will be less time for the other. But the balance of both is what helps us to move the bicycle of change. Where do I start if I don't have an idea? Now, maybe you've heard from the Citizens for Prison Reform, and you want to advocate for justice-involved people to maintain visitation rights. Maybe you heard from the Lansing Rescue Mission, and you want to serve meals to displaced persons in our community. Maybe you heard from the Justice League, and you want to be a part of addressing race-based economic disparity in our community. Where does your heart and your imagination start to grow? Now, as I mentioned earlier, my heart is pulled towards those who are unhoused or struggle to get basic resources in our community. While I'll admit, I can often get overwhelmed and get in that mindset of, like the man from the story, really, saying that you can't begin to make a difference, that I can't begin to make a difference. I freeze, and instead of trying something, I worry about whether or not it is even worth it. But several people have had such kind hearts and a grace about them to help show me when I misstep. And they truly show me what it looks like to make a difference, to be there for this community in whatever way would be the most helpful. And while I know there's always more that can be done, I trust that I can make a difference for at least one. And I know that you can, and are doing the same in whatever way that looks like for you. An important thing to remember as you do the work that God has for you is that you are not alone. There are organizations and partnerships that you can reach out to that will help you along the way, and that you will be able to use both the collective abilities and the gifts of multiple people to help enact change. Now, your church, our church, Sycamore Creek, is here with you. And we have many things to be able to partner with and events to be able, or to help combat injustices. And finally, you have a God who again and again shows up through the window of the prophets that shares this message with you. God passionately desires you, and you matter to God. Click. The Bible Jesus read. Read? Read. Read?